want to do one with 50 Cent. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like Jim.
Nah, I don't want to do nothing with that sucker. You heard? Leave him out the conversation.
That bullshit. You seen Jimmy talking about we Gucci boo boo. He in the Gucci store. Talking about we Gucci boo boo. The Light King was going up. Jimmy like Marita Monero.
They did the remix. It was the biggest alley-oop he could do for me. I understood a lot about music, and at that time, people were looking at the wrong way, and I was looking at the right way.
Who is Jim Jones? Like, he's not on anyone's top 10 list. He's no one's top 10 list, maybe not even his fans.
50 Cent just blasted Jim Jones for trash-talking Nas. And it didn't stop there. He even pulled out some rare footage showing Jim switching sides on Jay-Z. 1 minute, Jim was calling Jay soft. The next, he's out here begging for a Rock Nation deal.
If I told you I was in the Rock Nation office, how would you feel about that? Huh? You think I was lying? That's clear enough for you?
Everybody knows 50's never been cool with Jim or Jay, but he's always shown respect to Nas. So when Jim started talking wild, saying he's better than Nas and even claiming he made Nas go viral again, 50 wasn't having it. He took that real personal.
What I did for Nas probably never been done for him in his life. He's never been that viral at all, ever.
What 50 just exposed ain't just about Jim throwing shade at Nas. It runs way deeper. This is about Jim's long track record of switching sides and moving real sneaky. He's been out here flip-flopping for years. One day he's beefing, the next he's begging. Especially when it comes to Jay-Z. Check this out. Jim spent over a decade throwing jabs at Jay. He even went as far as slapping one of Jay's execs. But when the tables turned and Jim needed a deal, he came crawling right back, calling Jay a hero and begging to get signed. Straight up wild behavior. Now 50's using all this to remind folks exactly who Jim really is. Someone who picks and chooses sides when it benefits him, with no loyalty, no backbone, and no real respect. Especially not for the culture he always claims to stand for, but that's just scratching the surface. Jim's weak diss toward Nas ended up backfiring big time because it gave people like 50 the perfect chance to drag out his receipts and show the world his real stripes. Let's break down how Jim went from dissing Jay to straight up bowing down.
You shouldn't be able to say your names until they've done something in the genre of music. I've done too much in this music to even have to answer that question. Like Jim Jones, who is Jim Jones?
We all know 50 Cent never holds his tongue when it comes to calling out fake moves. And now he's calling Jim Jones Jay-Z's lapdog after that wild diss toward Nas. 50 shined a big spotlight on Jim's non-stop flip-flopping ways. In case you missed it, Jim actually said he's better than Nas. For real. He even clashed with Shannon Sharp, claiming he could run circles around Nas in the booth. Wild claim.
I'm way more influential than Nas, and I don't care what nobody say. I know I made a little boo-boo when you talk about the sales and all this type of shit. I don't feel like getting into that rhetoric about where I started and where he started.
Well, you said that.
But listen, Nas was nice when I was in high school. When I was in 10th grade, Nas came out. Nas was dope. We appreciated him. He had a little bit of run. But Nas always came up second to Jay and DMX and all these other people. Like,
Ain't no shame in that. There a lot of folks came up second to Tom Brady.
He never had that type of influence.
Even after a bunch of rappers called him out for saying he's better than Nas, Jim didn't back down. He doubled down hard. He even had the nerve to brag that he made Nas relevant again, claiming Nas hadn't been hot since that beef with Jay-Z. Straight up bold.
What I did for Nas probably never been done for him in his life. He's never been that viral at all, ever. Ever. He's never been talked about like this ever in his life.
Since Jim decided to bring Jay's name into it, you already know 50 Cent had to jump in and remind him about his messy history with Jay. And 50 didn't waste time. He dropped an old clip of Jim at Rock Nation HQ, looking all hyped and starstruck like a fanboy. Then 50 slid in with a savage caption. Someone asked me if I got more enemies than friends. I thought about it and said, yes, poor me. I'm suffering from success. LOL. Total mic drop. You might think 50's just being petty, but when you know the full story between Jim Jones and Jay-Z, that post hits way harder. Jim spent 13 years going hard at Jay with public shots, diss tracks, and even real-life street run-ins. But when it suited him, he did a full 180, begging for Jay's cosign like none of that ever happened. And that's 50's whole point right there. Jim's shady diss toward Nas is backfiring badly, cause it's digging up his old messy past and putting it right back in the spotlight. But wait, how did Jim go from dissing Jay and even slapping one of his execs to straight up begging for a Roc Nation deal? Let's rewind real quick. It all kicked off in 2002 when Cameron and Jim Jones were brought into Rockefeller by Dame Dash. Jim even said Cam was promised a VP role at Rockefeller. But Jay? He never said anything about it publicly. Later that year, Cam told The Source the tension with Jay was already brewing. Then it got even spicier. Jay recorded a remix of Cam and Jules Santana's hit, Oh Boy, and threw a verse dissing Nas. But Cam and Jim weren't feeling it at all. They refused to release the remix, and Cam even deleted Jay's verse later, saying he wasn't gonna let Jay use their record to fuel his beat.
I did a little something for you in the studio. I was coming in the studio, he was walking out. So I'm like, then he had something to Oh Boy. And I was like,
this is Oh Boy's already #1?
Yeah, it's popping.
This, all right.
This is popping.
Let's be clear.
Yeah, this is popping Oh Boy.
The rough draft for Oh Boy.
No,
this is when Oh Boy's already lit.
Right.
You on tour.
Right. So I listened to it and I was like, erase that shit.
That moment set the whole vibe moving forward. Jim and Cam felt like Jay had zero respect for them. That's when the sneak dissing really kicked off. Jim started taking shots at Jay nonstop in interviews and on the radio, calling him out as being too corporate and completely out of touch with the streets.
Get right to it. There seems to be some drama. You and The Rock, Jay-Z, you try to diss. You did diss him.
I diss nobody.
You dissed him.
I diss Michael Jordan.
Oh man, we just
there's no drama, man.
No, we're gonna get to that.
Shouts to Dame Dash, who started Rockefeller Records. If y'all don't know, he's responsible for Rockefeller getting off the floor that started in Harlem. You know what I'm talking about?
Jim was doing everything he could to make it clear. Dipset was raw, loud, and street heavy, while Jay was playing the clean-cut business game. Jim leaned hard into that contrast, pushing the idea that the streets had outgrown Jay and left him behind.
No, this that bit. No on there, bro.
All right, that's this. See, middle man. Give me that. I'm on there. Jones.
Capo.
Burning the streets up. Y'all know what it is, man. Purple Haze coming out. My dude Cam album coming out. Joel Santana, he's slated for September. You know what they call me, Geronimo Pratt. Dipset, the new Black Panther. Want no problems. I promise you that.
At first, Jay didn't clap back directly. He stayed quiet. But everybody could feel the tension bubbling inside Rockefeller. Then in 2006, Jim dropped We Fly High, and that ballin' catchphrase, it took over the culture. Jim finally had a solo smash on his hands, and that's when Jay-Z decided to step in. But he didn't show love. Instead, he dropped Brooklyn High, a remix using Jim's own beat, and it wasn't no tribute. It was a straight-up diss. Jay went in on Jim, mocking his flow, his bars, even his ad-libs. It was cold, calculated, and straight-up dismissive. But Jim wasn't gonna let that slide. He fired back with the beef mix, flipping the same beat and going directly at Jay, calling him old, out of touch, and weak. But this beef didn't stay on wax. It spilled into real life fast. In 2008, Jim was caught on security footage, putting hands on someone inside a Louis Vuitton store. Later, it came out the guy was none other than Jay-Z's longtime A&R, Lenny Santiago. Jim got arrested for it and ended up pleading guilty to misdemeanor assault. It got real ugly.
Jim Jones, the rapper, is going down. Jim Jones.
Now, Jay didn't say a word publicly about the incident, but behind the scenes, the message was loud and clear. This wasn't just rap beef anymore. It got personal. A few months later, Jay sat down with XXL for an interview about the state of hip-hop and that's when he threw slick shade at Jim. He called out songs like Jim's "Na Na 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 Na" as the kind of stuff that's ruining the culture. Jay might not have been running around in the streets, but he still knew how to clown Jim without breaking a sweat or saying his name directly. From that moment on, things turned icy. Between 2010 and 2015, there were no more disses, no public run-ins, just a quiet Cold War. No words, just pressure. But then, in 2015, Dipset came back swinging with a freestyle over Diddy's Victory beat. And that move? It hinted that the tension between Jim and Jay still wasn't dead. Cam and Jim came for Jay and Rock Nation hard, throwing shots at the whole brunch culture, clowning the label as nothing but industry puppets, and even name-dropping Beyonce. Cam rapped, "Having money don't make you a real one. You stepped on the court, you gonna play my game? Just take Shawty's advice and say my name." That was their slick way of trying to fire up the beef again. But by then, Jay-Z was on a whole different level. Billionaire status, married to Beyonce, collecting million-dollar art, launching Tidal, and building a sports empire. Basically, Jay had no reason to entertain the noise from Jim and Cam still yelling from the sidelines. And just to make it clear where he stood, a clip recently popped back up where Jay straight up said it. He compared himself to Michael Jordan and threw shade, saying Jim's like the 8th guy on the bench screaming at the MVP. Jay wasn't just ignoring them. He was brushing them off like they weren't even on the same court.
Hip-hop, of course, you know, is a competitive sport. But on the other end of it, it's like certain people shouldn't be able to say your names until they done something in the genre of music. I've done too much in this music to even have to answer that question. Like Jim Jones, who is Jim Jones? Like, he's not on anyone's top 10 list. He's no one's top 10 list, maybe not even his family. I was saying last night, it's like the 8th guy on the bench just screaming at Jordan, like, you a bum. Like, you wanna be like the 9th guy on the bench. I'm not even worried about it.
This is the moment Jim had to face the truth. All that dissing was only making himself look bad. And what he did next? That's exactly why 50 Cent is clowning him now. Jim pulled a full 180 and started begging Jay to sign him. And guess what? It finally happened in February 2017. After 13 years of non-stop beef, Jim officially joined Rock Nation and became part of Jay's squad. And Jim didn't sign on the low either. He went all out. Suddenly, he was bragging about getting invited to the Rock Nation brunch. Yep, the same event he used to roast. Now he was out here praising Jay in interviews, acting like the most loyal supporter ever. This is the same guy who used to call Jay soft, accuse him of turning his back on the streets, and even put hands on his close friend. Now saying Jay was his role model the whole time? Come on. But Jay still didn't say a word. No public post, no welcome message, no big brother moment, just one lonely photo of him and Jim floating around. And even in that pic, Jay looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. Jim finally got a seat at the table, but Jay made it crystal clear. They weren't equals, and never would be. Jim was just another name in the Rock Nation files. Which is ironic because from 2002 to 2017, Jim built part of his whole brand off flexing about not being associated with Jay-Z. Now, he's in the folder like everybody else. Jim built Dipset to stand as the anti-Rock Nation, the street answer to Jay-Z's polished corporate empire. But when it came down to it, the money talked louder than the pride. The whole image Jim spent over a decade pushing, it crumbled the moment he needed that deal. Jay didn't have to clap back, didn't need to drop a diss. He just waited. And when Jim finally bent the knee, Jay signed him, shook his hand, and kept it pushing like it was just business. And that right there, that's what 50 Cent's been pointing out all along. Jim ran his mouth for years, throwing shade at Jay. But in the end, he was the one chasing a seat at the table. Thing is, most folks might have let it all fade into history. If Jim hadn't disrespected Nas, that one move brought the spotlight right back on his past and gave people like 50 the green light to pull out every receipt. Now the real question is, how deep will this fallout go? Can Jim bounce back, or is this the final curtain call for him? Make sure to like, subscribe, drop a comment, and share if you're rocking with this breakdown. Catch you on the next one.